This dazzling ancient city might look like just another overgrown ruin swallowed by the jungle, but it's not what you think, because what lies beneath tells a story far stranger and more advanced than anyone ever imagined. The ancient Maya weren't just stacking stones in the forest. They were building one of the most sophisticated civilizations the world has ever seen. Their temples soared higher than cathedrals. Their mathematics predicted eclipses with terrifying precision, and their writing system, long dismissed as just pretty pictures, is now known to be one of the most complex scripts ever invented. They mastered astronomy, art, architecture, and agriculture, all without metal tools or the wheel. And yet, despite all of this brilliance, their story ends in silence. For 3,000 years, the Maya dominated Central America, ruling over vast city-states with fierce kings and queens, orchestrating grand rituals and recording their dynasties in stone. But then something went wrong. Their magnificent cities were abandoned, their palaces left to crumble. The question is, why? What happened to these brilliant people? And how did such a powerful culture collapse so completely, that much of it was swallowed by rainforest and forgotten for centuries? Now, for the first time, a groundbreaking 2-year investigation is combining cutting-edge space technology with ancient ruins to uncover the truth. Using tools originally designed to peer inside Egyptian pyramids, scientists are now scanning Maya temples to hunt for lost tombs, buried chambers, and long-dead kings. What they're finding could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the Maya, and it all starts with one mysterious temple, a few particles from space, and a civilization that refused to be forgotten. If we don't solve this ancient mystery, and soon, we risk losing more than just stories carved in stone. We risk losing the blueprint of a civilization that shaped an entire region for over 3,000 years. Think about that. 3 millennia of innovation, of kingdoms rising and falling, of a people who mapped the stars without telescopes and built cities that rivaled anything in Europe or Asia at the time. And yet, so much of it remains hidden, lost, beneath dense jungle, buried in unmarked tombs, or locked away in symbols we've only just begun to understand. If modern tools like LiDAR, muon imaging, and geological sampling aren't used now to uncover what's left, the window may close forever. What's at stake isn't just understanding how they lived, it's understanding how they fell. Because their collapse wasn't just dramatic, it was catastrophic. Cities emptied out, monuments stopped being built, and the people simply disappeared from the pages of history. Some believe it was war, others blame climate change. The truth? Still buried. But if we can't find it, we may be missing vital lessons about our own future. The Maya may have thought they were facing the end of the world. What if they were? Right, and we just haven't figured out why. If you're as fascinated by lost worlds and unsolved mysteries as we are, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what we uncover next. Drop a comment below. What do you think caused the Maya collapse? And if you enjoyed the journey so far, give this video a like to help more people discover the hidden history buried beneath our feet. You might think of the ancient world as a place of pyramids in Egypt or temples in Greece, but tucked away in the dense jungles of Central America was a civilization that could rival them all, the Maya. Stretching across what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, the Maya world was vast, more than 250,000 square kilometers at its peak. That's larger than the entire United Kingdom. This wasn't some scattered collection of huts and tribes. This was a sprawling network of powerful city-states, each ruled by its own king, each competing for glory, territory, and influence. And these weren't small villages either. Cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and Palenque boasted populations in the tens of thousands. Some researchers now estimate that the Maya population may have peaked at over 10 million people. That's a staggering number, especially when you realize most of these cities were built in the middle of the jungle, without roads as we know them, and without any metal tools or draft animals to help. It wasn't just that they built cities, it's where they built them and how seamlessly they blended architecture with nature. But the Maya world wasn't one unified empire. It was more like ancient Greece, a patchwork of independent kingdoms, each with its own politics, culture, and ambitions. They formed alliances, waged wars, and even took each other's kings captive in brutal displays of power. And yet, despite all this rivalry, they shared a remarkably cohesive cultural identity. From the highlands of Guatemala to the lowland plains of the Yucatan, you'd find the same complex calendar system, the same vivid hieroglyphs, the same cosmic beliefs tying together the heavens and the earth. At the heart of every Maya city stood towering temples and pyramids, some rising over 30 meters tall, wrapped in vibrant paint and intricate carvings. These weren't just religious buildings, they were political statements, cosmic observatories, and historical records. Imagine walking through a city where every wall tells a story, every monument is part of a celestial calendar, and every plaza is a stage for divine theater. That was the Maya world, and it lasted a long time. From around 2000 BCE to the fall of the last Maya stronghold in the 17th century, this civilization thrived for nearly 3,000 years. That's longer than ancient Rome, the Inca Empire, and even dynastic China during some of its key eras. Their timeline isn't just impressive, it's mind-blowing. And yet, for centuries, their achievements were dismissed or misunderstood. Early European explorers called the ruins they found cities of savages, and couldn't believe the indigenous people around them were descended from the architects of these magnificent sites. That historical blindness is part of why so much of the Maya story remains hidden. Jungle growth swallowed their cities, myths blurred with fact, colonialism buried their past in shame and silence, and the deeper tragedy. So many of these cities were abandoned before the Europeans even arrived. Something happened between the 8th and 9th centuries AD, a wave of collapse that swept through the lowlands. Grand capitals were deserted, monuments stopped being carved, trade routes fell silent, and no one knows exactly why. So here we are, centuries later, still trying to piece together the story. The cities are still there in fragments, the population estimates are still being revised upward, and the clues are everywhere, from temple walls to cave paintings to lake beds holding sediment that hasn't seen the sun in over 1,000 years. But time is not on our side. The rainforest reclaims everything. The longer we wait, the more we risk losing, because here's the dark reality. If we don't understand what happened to the Maya, how such a mighty civilization rose, thrived, and then fractured, we're not just losing history. We might be ignoring warnings. Warnings about climate, about politics, about what happens when the balance between nature and human ambition tips too far in one direction. The Maya left us a map. The question is, will we learn to read it before it fades for good? Here's the thing. When people hear ancient civilization, they often picture something impressive but outdated. Stone tools, basic farming, maybe a few cool monuments. But the Maya weren't just impressive for their time. They were ahead of it. In fact, some of their knowledge, particularly in astronomy and mathematics, rivals what we use today. That sink in. A civilization that didn't use the wheel and never discovered metal tools was able to predict solar eclipses with better accuracy than European astronomers 1,000 years later. So how did they do it? Well, it wasn't magic. It was centuries of careful observation, intellectual discipline, and cultural obsession with time. The Maya calendar wasn't just about marking birthdays or festivals. It was sacred. Time was woven into their religion, their politics, their architecture. They developed not one, but three interlocking calendar systems, including a 260-day ceremonial calendar and a 365-day solar calendar, both used simultaneously. And they tracked long cycles of time stretching thousands of years into the past and future. To them, history was circular, not linear. Everything had a pattern. That pattern was written in the stars. Maya astronomers built observatories, sometimes hidden inside temples, to map the movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and other planets. They recorded celestial alignments, equinoxes, solstices, and eclipses with shocking precision. And they used this data not just to plan agriculture or ceremonies, but to guide royal decisions. Crowning a new king? Better make sure the planets are in the right place. Starting a war? Double-check the moon phases. It wasn't superstition. It was a cosmic contract. The Maya believed they were literally syncing their actions with the will of the universe. And if that doesn't sound advanced enough, let's talk numbers. The Maya developed a vigesimal base 20, and it was used in sophisticated calculations. Imagine doing high-level math, astronomy, and urban planning, all without paper, pens, or computers. Later reveals stunning detail, dynastic records, poetic texts, even dates of royal births and deaths. These weren't just decorative symbols. They were history books, propaganda tools, and sacred texts, all carved into stone walls and staircases. And we haven't even touched on their architecture. The Maya didn't build cities at random. Everything had meaning. Pyramids were aligned to celestial events. Temples were constructed to amplify sound, and city layouts reflected spiritual cosmology. Massive platforms were raised without the help of metal, wheels, or beasts of burden. It was all done by hand, stone by stone, guided by deeply rooted knowledge of engineering and environmental planning. Then there's their art. Vibrant murals, intricately carved stelae, delicate jade masks. The level of craftsmanship is so fine, it's easy to forget it was all done with stone tools. Maya artisans created pottery with firing techniques that preserved brilliant colors for over 1,000 years. Their sculptures are loaded with symbolism. Every gesture, every facial expression meant something. This wasn't just aesthetics, it was narrative, identity, power. But here's where the tone shifts. For all their advancements, the Maya were also steeped in blood and sacrifice. Their culture revolved around keeping balance in the cosmos, and that balance often required human lives. Some of the same pyramids used to track solstices were also used for ritual killings. Kings were both astronomers and executioners. Royal courts could be places of poetry and strategy, or scenes of brutal offerings to the gods. It's a paradox that makes the Maya so difficult and so fascinating to understand. So the question isn't whether the Maya were advanced, it's whether we've finally advanced enough to understand them. Their temples still stand. Their glyphs still speak. Their astronomical records still match our modern data. But unless we continue decoding, excavating, and listening, we risk letting one of humanity's most brilliant cultures vanish into the vines and shadows of time. When most people think of unlocking ancient secrets, they imagine archaeologists with shovels and brushes, carefully digging through dirt to unearth bits of pottery or long-lost bones. But what if I told you that some of the biggest breakthroughs in archaeology today aren't coming from the ground at all, but from outer space? That's exactly what's happening right now in the dense jungles of Honduras, where a team of Japanese scientists is using cutting-edge space-age technology to peer inside an ancient Maya temple without ever cracking a single stone. Welcome to the future of archaeology, where cosmic particles are being used to solve thousand-year-old mysteries. At the heart of this investigation is Temple 11, a massive and enigmatic structure in the ancient city of Copan. For nearly 5 centuries, Copan served as the political and ceremonial center of a vast Maya kingdom. It was a city of immense beauty and sophistication, ornate plazas, towering pyramids, and stunning stone monuments covered with glyphs that tell the stories of rulers and gods. And yet, despite all the grandeur, something critical is missing: the tombs of its kings. Archaeologists have long known the names of the rulers who once sat atop Copan's throne. 16 kings ruled here in an unbroken dynasty, carefully recorded in hieroglyphs. But when it comes to their actual final resting places, fewer than half have ever been found. And for scientists and historians alike, that's a major problem. Because tombs aren't just burial sites, they're time capsules. They contain treasures, clothing, artifacts, even biological clues that can tell us who these people were, how they lived, and how they died. Without them, we're left guessing. That's where Seiichi Nakamura and his team come in. They're not traditional archaeologists. They're physicists, armed not with trowels but with muon detectors. Now here's where it gets interesting. Muons are subatomic particles that are constantly showering down on Earth, created when cosmic rays hit. Like a hidden room or tomb, they go right through. By placing detectors underneath or around a structure, scientists can measure how many muons come through from different angles. If there's a hollow area inside a solid structure, the detectors will notice a spike in particles. Basically, it's like getting an X-ray of a pyramid, powered by space. And the technology isn't just theoretical. In 2017, muon imaging revealed a massive hidden void inside Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza, something that had gone undetected for over 4,000 years. If it worked in Egypt, Seiichi believes, it could work in Copan. So the team heads into the ruins. Humidity, jungle insects get into everything. And the terrain itself is a challenge, with steep slopes, dense undergrowth, and ancient stone paths that have cracked and shifted with time. Still, they persist. The first step is finding a stable tunnel beneath Temple 11. Luckily, there's an old excavation route from a previous dig, partially collapsed, but still usable. Here, the team plunge the kingdom into chaos. Ruler 15 is believed to have been a restorer, a leader who tried to bring Copan back from the brink. If his tomb is inside this temple, the brutal truth of nature, earthquakes, erosion, and the jungle itself can swallow entire chambers over time. That's what makes muon imaging so powerful. Unlike traditional excavation, which can disturb or damage fragile sites, this technology allows the team to look inside without touching anything. If there's something there, they'll know. If not, at least they won't have destroyed any part of the monument looking for it. And here's the kicker: if they do find something, it won't just be a win for Copan. It could revolutionize how we search ancient sites all over the world. Maya cities are notorious for being multi-layered, temples built on top of temples, kings burying their predecessors to claim their power. If muon imaging can reliably identify hidden chambers in these structures, it could usher in a new era of non-invasive exploration. No more months of blind digging, no more guesswork, just pure data and precision. For in the heart of the Mexican jungle, when archaeologists uncovered something inside a Maya temple that nobody saw coming. At first glance, it dates in the Maya world. It thrived between the 5th and 8th centuries AD, ruled over by a powerful dynasty that left behind intricate carvings, massive temples, and a distinct architectural style that still takes your breath away. But for a long time, the Temple of Inscriptions was a bit of a mystery. People assumed it was just ceremonial, maybe a platform for speeches, maybe a place for rituals. After all, that's what most of the surface features suggested. Then came the clues: peculiar circular holes in the temple floor. Not random damage, not erosion, but clearly man-made. At first, they didn't make sense. Then someone had the idea to pass a rope through one of the holes, and everything changed. Beneath the stone slab was a hidden staircase, sealed off and descending deep into the heart of the pyramid. 2 years of careful excavation later, archaeologists reached the bottom, and what they found was nothing short of historic. A massive sarcophagus weighing over 20 tons, surrounded by jade, artifacts, and one of the most detailed tombs ever discovered in the Americas. It belonged to Pakal the Great, the most legendary ruler of Palenque. His name was already known from inscriptions, but now here he was, buried beneath the city he once ruled, in a chamber so elaborately constructed it had clearly been built around his sarcophagus. The Maya didn't just slide his coffin in after the fact. They designed the entire temple with the burial in mind. Just like in Egypt's Great Pyramid, the structure wasn't just a building, it was a cosmic machine aligned with celestial events, packed with symbolism and dedicated to a single king's journey into the afterlife. And this is where the comparison with Egypt really hits. In both civilizations, tombs weren't simply graves, they were spiritual launch pads. In Egypt, pharaohs were buried with gold and texts meant to guide them through the underworld. In Palenque, Pakal was surrounded by jade jewelry, ceremonial artifacts, and a breathtaking death mask made of pure green jade. Every piece had meaning. Every carving on the sarcophagus lid told a story of his divine lineage, of his rebirth, of his connection to the gods. The level of detail rivals anything from the tomb of Tutankhamun. But the similarities go beyond symbolism. Just like the Great Pyramid, Pakal's tomb was hidden, no obvious entrance, no public ceremony. It was sealed off, meant to be undisturbed for eternity. And yet, the irony is that its rediscovery has given us more insight into Maya beliefs and politics than almost any other site. For centuries, scholars underestimated the Maya, seeing them as isolated jungle people. But Pakal's tomb told a different story. This was a civilization that practiced dynastic rule, that invested heavily in the afterlife, and that used architecture, astronomy, and art to maintain power and influence. Here's where it gets darker. The opulence of Pakal's tomb isn't just a testament to how powerful he was. It's a glimpse into the inequality of Maya society. While elites were buried with jade and gold, commoners lived and died in complete anonymity. Their remains often aren't preserved, their stories lost, and yet these were the people who built the temples, grew the food, carved the glyphs. The tomb reminds us that while Maya civilization was stunningly advanced, it was also deeply hierarchical. Power was consolidated at the top, and that power was expressed in death just as much as in life. And now, this single discovery at Palenque has inspired an entirely new approach to how we search for tombs across the Maya world. If Pakal could be buried inside a sealed-off pyramid, who else might be hidden beneath the countless temples that still dot the landscape? That question is exactly what's driving current investigations in places like Copan, where scientists are now using space-age tech, muon imaging, to try and replicate the same kind of breakthrough. There's also something fascinating about how these two stories, Egypt's Great Pyramid and Palenque's Temple of Inscriptions, mirror each other across time and geography. Different continents, different languages, different tools. And yet, both cultures independently developed monumental architecture to glorify their rulers. Both embedded astronomical symbolism into their structures. Both built tombs that were not just places of burial, but expressions of power, legitimacy, and cosmic connection. But unlike Egypt, which has been studied and documented extensively for over 2 centuries, many Maya sites still lie beneath layers of jungle, waiting to be rediscovered. We're only scratching the surface. For every Pakal we find, there are dozens of rulers still missing. Entire cities remain unmapped. Entire tombs may be right beneath our feet. And in some cases, we may not have centuries left to find them. Climate change, deforestation, looting, and urban expansion all threaten to erase what the rainforest has preserved for over a millennium. That's why what happened at Palenque matters so much. It's not just a story of one king. It's a proof of concept, evidence that these temples can contain the answers we've been searching for. And not just about death and burial, but about leadership, trade, religion, and science. The more we learn about the Maya, the more we see how forward-thinking they really were. Pakal's architects didn't just build to impress, they built to last. They built to tell a story, and now it's our job to listen. When you first look at a Maya temple wall, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Hundreds of intricate symbols, twisting lines, animal faces, dots, bars, and abstract forms, carved deep into stone. At a glance, they look like art, maybe decoration, maybe religious symbols. But what if I told you they're sentences? Entire books carved into walls, recording births, deaths, wars, love, betrayal, astronomy, and divine prophecy. And for centuries, we couldn't read a word of it. The truth is, we were staring at a written language more complex than anything in Europe at the time, and for the longest time, we didn't even realize it was a language at all. Western explorers and scholars dismissed Maya glyphs as primitive decoration or meaningless religious doodles. It was easier to assume these so-called jungle people couldn't possibly have developed a writing system sophisticated enough to rival Chinese or Egyptian hieroglyphs. But they did, and once we started to crack the code, everything changed. The breakthrough began not in a ruin, but in a book, one of the very few that survived the Spanish conquest. It's called the Dresden Codex, and it's one of only 4 known Maya books still in existence. The rest were burned, torched by conquistadors who saw them as demonic. Written on bark paper and folded accordion style, the Dresden Codex is over 800 years old. Its pages are packed with detailed illustrations, animals, gods, rituals, and those same baffling glyphs we see carved in stone. For years, no one could read them. The symbols were beautiful but impenetrable. Some scholars thought they were purely religious. Others believed they might be calendars. The problem was that everyone was guessing. Imagine trying to decode a foreign script with no Rosetta Stone, no living speakers, and only fragments of context. That's what early Maya scholars were up against. But then something clicked. A few decades ago, researchers realized a small but crucial fact. Some of the glyphs weren't just logograms, symbols. For words, they were syllables. Once that piece of the puzzle fell into place, everything started to open up. Scholars began comparing the codex with glyphs carved on stelae, temples, and altars across the Maya world. Over time, patterns emerged, names, titles, verbs. A language began to take shape. It was like discovering that a culture you thought was silent had been screaming their stories into stone the whole time. And suddenly those temples weren't just ruins, they were libraries. Each wall, each step, each column recorded history, royal genealogies, political alliances, ceremonial calendars. One glyph might say, "He was born," another, "She ascended the throne," another, "Captured in battle." The Maya weren't just recording events, they were crafting narratives, carefully designed propaganda to immortalize their kings and queens as divine rulers. That's where the human stories start to emerge. Take Copan, for example, a powerful Maya city in what's now Honduras. At the heart of the city stands one of the most astonishing monuments in the entire Maya world, the hieroglyphic stairway. From a distance, it looks like a regular flight of stone steps, but up close it's something else entirely. Each riser is carved with glyphs, over 2,000 of them. It's the longest known Maya inscription, telling the story of an entire dynasty, 16 kings spanning centuries, their births, their conquests, their divine right to rule. It's not just a stairway, it's a family tree in stone. And while the glyphs told us who these rulers were, it was the tombs that showed us how they lived and how they died. In the 1990s, archaeologist David Sedat made one of the most astonishing finds beneath the Acropolis of Copan, a burial chamber unlike anything ever discovered before. Hidden beneath layers of later construction was a vibrant red-painted temple, and beneath that, a royal tomb. Inside was the skeleton of a man, laid on a stone slab and surrounded by jade jewelry, rings, and an elaborate chess piece. And near his head, carved imagery of two birds, a quetzal and a scarlet macaw. The glyphs spelled out his name, Yaxcucmo. He was the founder of the Copan dynasty. But here's the twist. Analysis of his bones showed he wasn't local. He came from hundreds of miles away, possibly from the distant Maya city of Tikal. That discovery sent shockwaves through the academic community. It meant that Copan's legendary founder wasn't born to rule. He came from the outside, took power, and established an entire bloodline that would shape the city's destiny for 400 years. Even more surprising, nearby, another tomb was found. This time, the body was that of a woman. Her tomb was packed with treasure, jade beads, enormous pearls, elaborate pottery. Experts believe she may have been Yaxcucmo's queen, and that her political marriage helped solidify his claim to the throne. But her identity is still unknown. We don't have her name, only her story, written in the wealth buried with her. These aren't just dry archaeological facts, they're dramas. Royal power plays, marriages of state, outsiders clawing their way into history. And all of it was written down in glyphs and preserved in tombs, just waiting for us to read them. But deciphering the glyphs isn't always straightforward. In some cases, entire sections are damaged or missing. In others, the symbols are out of order, jumbled by centuries of collapse and decay. That's what makes the process both frustrating and thrilling. It's part intellectual challenge, part detective work. Scholars spend months on a single glyph block, cross-referencing with codices, temple inscriptions, and stelae scattered across hundreds of miles. Each breakthrough feels like unlocking a door that's been closed for 1,000 years. And even now, we're not done. Current estimates suggest we've only deciphered about 85% of the known Maya glyphs. That means there's still a massive amount of information we can't read, still questions we can't answer, still names we can't say. But with every discovery, every newly excavated tomb, every newly analyzed codex page, we get closer. In Palenque, we saw the same kind of revelation with the tomb of Pakal the Great. His sarcophagus was covered in glyphs explaining his lineage, his divine descent, and his expected resurrection as a maize god. Again, the glyphs didn't just tell us who he was, they told us what he believed, how his people saw him, and how he expected to rule even after death. His jade death mask wasn't just a symbol of wealth, it was part of his transformation into a deity. These tombs and glyphs go hand in hand. One without the other only tells half the story. The glyphs provide context, names, rituals, events. The tombs provide humanity, bodies, artifacts, emotional resonance. Together, they give us a window into a world that was as advanced, complex, and layered as any in human history. And yet, there's still a dark undertone to all of this. For every Pakal or Yaxcucmo we find, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of Maya people whose names we'll never recover. The scribes, the artisans, the warriors, the farmers. Their stories weren't written in jade or stone. Their tombs were simpler, if they had tombs at all. They didn't commission stairways carved with 2,000 glyphs, but they built the cities. They carved the stones, they fought the wars and grew the corn, and worshipped the gods with quiet devotion. Even in death, the Maya world was deeply political. That's what makes these discoveries so powerful and so emotional. Every tomb, every glyph is more than just data. It's a voice echoing across time, and for the first time in centuries, we're starting to hear what they were trying to say. If you've ever flown over a dense jungle, you know what it looks like from the sky. An endless sea of green, stretching in every direction, trees packed so tight, the canopy hides everything underneath. To the naked eye, it seems untouched, pristine, empty, but that's the illusion. Because under all that foliage, the Maya world was never empty. In fact, it was crowded, a web of cities, roads, and fortresses that no one knew existed. And it took a space-age laser to finally prove it. The technology is called LiDAR, short for light detection and ranging. In simple terms, it's like radar, but with lasers. Mounted on aircraft, LiDAR systems fire hundreds of thousands of laser pulses every second down toward the Earth. Most of those beams bounce off the treetops, but some make it through the gaps in the canopy and hit the ground. When the reflections come back, computers process them into ultra-detailed 3D maps of the terrain, trees stripped away, revealing what's been hiding beneath for centuries. And what researchers found under the jungles of Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Mexico stunned everyone. What looked like wilderness turned out to be a colossal sprawl of ancient urban planning. 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures, yes, 60,000, were revealed in just one massive LiDAR survey. Temples, houses, terraces, ball courts, causeways, and not scattered randomly, organized, connected, engineered. Cities larger and more densely populated than anyone imagined. Suddenly the numbers had to be rewritten. The Maya weren't a sparse, jungle-dwelling people. They were part of a civilization with over 10 million inhabitants at its peak. That's nearly double the most optimistic previous estimates. And here's the kicker. We didn't dig for any of this. We didn't touch a single stone. We just scanned from the air and let the jungle's secrets emerge. But that's not all LiDAR uncovered. Along with the cities came something else: infrastructure, defensive walls, moats, elevated highways connecting settlements across miles, fortress-like hilltops, strategic choke points. This wasn't just impressive architecture, it was evidence of conflict. The Maya landscape wasn't just ceremonial, it was militarized, and this forced scholars to rethink a core assumption that the Maya were mostly peaceful, spiritual, and ceremonial. For years, that was the dominant narrative, that they were astronomers, farmers, builders, and artists, which they were. But they were also strategists, generals, and warriors. The sprawling infrastructure suggested a world where kingdoms competed fiercely for resources, trade routes, prestige, and power. Take the massive defensive wall at Tikal, for example, one of the most famous Maya cities. It stretches for kilometers, enclosing not just ceremonial centers, but large residential zones. This wasn't just protection from wild animals. This was the architecture of fear, an ancient version of a fortress built to repel real threats. In other sites, researchers found hidden watchtowers, narrow entryways for funneling invaders, and citadels perched on ridgelines with panoramic views. These were the military blueprints of a society that expected conflict. And the more archaeologists compared LiDAR data with historical glyphs and stelae, the more it all lined up. The cities didn't just grow, they competed. They aligned with each other, betrayed each other, and sometimes outright destroyed each other. Even their writing backed this up. Glyphs often celebrate kings capturing enemy rulers in battle. Monuments record conquests with brutal honesty. And the deeper we look, the clearer the picture becomes. This was not a civilization of pacifists. It was a world shaped by warfare, a constant push and pull for dominance. And yet, that wasn't the story we were telling, was it? For decades, Maya civilization was portrayed as isolated, spiritual, and gentle, perhaps because that's what we wanted it to be. In contrast to the bloody history of the Aztecs or the rigid imperial machine of the Incas, the Maya seemed like the thinkers of Mesoamerica, But now LiDAR has shown us what stone walls couldn't hide. Power struggles were everywhere. Cities built defenses for a reason. Kings ruled by sword as well as ceremony. And this shift from peaceful stargazers to military states changes everything. Because now we have to ask, was war part of what brought them down? It's a haunting thought. You scan a patch of jungle and you see the ruins of a road. But that road isn't just a path, it's a tactical supply line. You find a city wall and suddenly you're not looking at a temple complex, you're looking at a city under siege. Everything becomes part of a broader, darker story. A civilization that built big, not just to impress the gods, but to protect themselves from each other. And it adds a whole new dimension to the mystery of the Maya collapse. What if it wasn't just drought or famine or religious upheaval? What if it was war? Prolonged, unrelenting war between rival cities, depleting resources, toppling leaders, fracturing alliances. Maybe the Maya didn't vanish because of one big event, but because 1,000 small conflicts finally cracked the foundation of their world. That's the story LiDAR is helping to uncover. Not just a map of cities, but a geopolitical network. A web of alliances, hostilities and defenses that rival anything in ancient Europe or Asia. It reframes the Maya not just as engineers or astronomers, but as a people deeply entangled in politics, strategy and survival. And the most remarkable part? We've only scanned a fraction of the Maya world. What else is still hiding beneath the jungle canopy? How many more walled cities? How many more battle-scarred strongholds? With each new scan, more questions emerge. But one thing is certain, the Maya were building for more than just ceremony. They were building to endure, and sometimes to fight. It's tempting to imagine the ancient Maya world as a constellation of independent, proud cities, each focused on building temples, observing the stars, and crafting their own destiny. But beneath that image lies something much more volatile. The Maya weren't just city builders, they were rivals, schemers, and at times conquerors. Their world wasn't peaceful, it was political, and often it was brutal. And if you zoom out far enough, you start to see something uncanny. Patterns of rise and fall that feel eerily modern. Alliances, betrayals, invasions, and eventually, collapse. Let's start with Tikal, one of the crown jewels of Maya civilization. At its peak, it was home to over 60,000 people, one of the largest cities in the pre-Columbian Americas. Its temples rose above the jungle canopy like skyscrapers. Its rulers were legendary, but its greatness wasn't guaranteed. Tikal was constantly looking over its shoulder because power in the Maya world was always contested. And one of the most dramatic power plays came not from another Maya city, but from far beyond. Around the 4th century AD, something unexpected happened. A foreign influence, Teotihuacan, a massive city located over 1,000 kilometers away in central Mexico, sent shockwaves into the Maya lowlands. We're talking about one of the largest cities in the world at the time, home to more than 100,000 people, with grand avenues and the towering Pyramid of the Sun. Teotihuacan was a powerhouse, militarily, culturally, and economically, and somehow it reached Tikal. Archaeologists discovered a tomb in Tikal, one that looked nothing like anything Maya. The artifacts, the burial style, even the architecture all screamed Teotihuacan. A man buried with ceremonial weapons, shields, and incense. Burners that clearly traced back to central Mexico. It didn't look like diplomacy, it looked like a takeover. Some scholars believe this was an elite warrior or noble sent by Teotihuacan to install a new line of leadership in Tikal. And if that's true, then it means one of the greatest Maya cities had its history rewritten by a foreign power. This isn't mythology, it's geopolitics. A large empire flexing its influence, possibly even launching a shadow invasion under the guise of royal marriage or cultural exchange. And it wasn't subtle. the entire political trajectory of Tikal changed. The rulers who followed began referencing Teotihuacan-style imagery in their monuments. Suddenly, feathered serpent motifs appeared. Weapons changed, warfare changed, coincidence probably not. This tells us something big. Maya politics weren't isolated. They were connected to a larger Mesoamerican power structure with shifting alliances and long-distance interventions. And as Tikal grew, so did its list of enemies. Enter Calakmul, one of Tikal's fiercest rivals. The two cities fought an on-again, off-again superpower rivalry that lasted for centuries. They formed alliances with smaller city-states, pulled in regional allies, and waged proxy wars that mirrored Cold War tactics. One year, Tikal might be ascendant, forming trade pacts and launching victorious campaigns. The next, Calakmul would flip the script, toppling a puppet regime or capturing one of Tikal's allies. In one of the most dramatic recorded events, Calakmul teamed up with another powerful city, Karakol, and launched a devastating attack on Tikal around 562 AD. The result? Tikal's ruler was killed, the city's monuments stopped being built, and for decades its political power was in ruins. This wasn't just a military loss, it was a total eclipse of influence, and what followed was referred to as the hiatus, a period where Tikal seemed to fall silent. That's the level of political drama we're dealing with. Rulers weren't just fighting over crops or territory, they were fighting over narrative, dynastic legitimacy, and cosmic favor. Their wars were often ceremonial in tone, yes, but real in consequences. Cities were razed, kings were sacrificed, alliances were bought, sold, and broken. Even Palenque, a city known for its beauty and artistry, wasn't immune. It was famously defeated by Calakmul during one of its expansionist phases. The queen, Lady Sakuk, was forced to surrender, and for a time, Palenque was left politically gutted. It wasn't until her son, Pakal the Great, came to power that the city began to rebuild its pride and monuments. His tomb now tells that story, but it's one carved from defeat, not just victory. And all of this chaos leads us to a bigger question. Did this endless competition contribute to the Maya collapse? By the late 8th and early 9th centuries, the cracks were showing. Many of the major city-states that once formed powerful networks began to decline rapidly. Monuments stopped being erected. Elite tombs became rare. Trade routes dried up. No, some places, entire cities, were abandoned in a matter of decades. What happened? Well, part of it may have been environmental. Drought, crop failures, overpopulation. But looking at the political landscape through the lens of warfare and rivalry, you see a different kind of pressure building. One where intercity conflict weakened cooperation, drained resources, and made it impossible to coordinate collective solutions. No shared infrastructure, no unified defense, just every kingdom for itself. If you squint, it starts to look familiar. Like the fall of Rome, or the fracturing of medieval Europe. But unlike those civilizations, the Maya didn't leave behind a clear record of what happened. Their glyphs stopped mid-story. Their cities faded into the jungle. Their alliances disintegrated, and their descendants moved to smaller villages, scattered across the region. It wasn't one empire falling. It was dozens of kingdoms imploding from within. And what's eerie is how quiet the collapse was. No grand final battle, no climactic event, just a slow unraveling of the systems that held everything together. The kings stopped building monuments, the scribes stopped carving glyphs, the people walked away. What we're left with are the ruins and the buried glyphs that hint at the politics that once ruled them. So now, when you look at a Maya city, don't just see temples and pyramids. See a power center, a place that fought for dominance, traded influence, and made deals behind the scenes. The Maya weren't just astronomers and architects. They were diplomats, generals, and kings, locked in a long game of survival. And in the And even they couldn't hold it all together. For a civilization that built monuments to eternity, the Maya sure disappeared fast. One moment their cities were buzzing, markets full, temples active, kings ruling from jade-covered thrones. And then, over the course of just a few generations, it was all gone. Cities emptied out, dynasties collapsed, and stone carving stopped. As if someone had flipped a cosmic switch. It's one of history's greatest enigmas. How could a civilization so advanced, so widespread, just fall apart? That mystery has haunted archaeologists for decades, and while theories have ranged from warfare and rebellion to invasion and divine punishment, one of the most intriguing answers might be buried not in the ruins themselves, but at the bottom of a lake. Enter Tishi Nakagawa, a Japanese geologist who believes the story of the Maya collapse is written in layers of mud. Yes, mud. Because as strange as it sounds, ancient sediment holds more than dirt. It holds the fingerprints of climate, pollution, vegetation, even disaster. Think of it as nature's hard drive, storing thousands of years of environmental history, one rainy season at a time. Tishi and his team set up shop on a lake nestled beside an abandoned Maya site. The water is calm, still, almost sacred in its silence. But underneath, there's action. Hundreds of years' worth of fallen pollen, ash, minerals, and micro-debris, all settling into neat layers like pages in a forgotten diary. Using a floating platform, the team lowers a core drill to the lake bed and extracts long cylinders of sediment, each one a timeline of environmental change. What they find is disturbing. Around the same time, the Maya cities were collapsing. Between the 8th and 9th centuries AD, there's a drastic change in the sediment. Less pollen from crops, more evidence of drought, traces of widespread deforestation. In other words, the land itself was starting to die, and it wasn't a gentle decline, it was sharp, sudden, and massive in scale. Imagine cities like Tikal, Copan, or Calakmul facing year after year of failed harvests, dried-up reservoirs, and political unrest, all while kings continued demanding tribute and labor for temples. But here's the twist. The Maya knew how to manage their environment. They weren't careless. They built reservoirs, canals, terracing systems. They understood the cycles of the sun, rain, and soil. So the collapse wasn't about ignorance. It was about scale. The population had grown so large, and the cities so interconnected, that even a few bad years could trigger a domino effect. Combine that with political infighting, elite rivalries, and an over-reliance on ceremonial power, and you get something fragile, something that looks powerful but can't bend without breaking. And this brings us to jade. Jade was more than a gemstone to the Maya. It was eternity, power, divinity, all rolled into one glowing green surface. While gold and silver were prized in other cultures, for the Maya, jade was sacred. It didn't rust, it didn't burn. It could be carved into impossibly intricate shapes. It was tough, harder than steel, and in a world without metal tools, that made it precious beyond measure. But jade wasn't just rare, it was symbolic. Kings were buried with jade beads pressed into their mouths, placed there to feed their spirit on the journey to the afterlife. Jade masks transformed dead rulers into gods. Jade amulets hung from the necks of queens, priests, warriors, and if you controlled the jade trade, you controlled the lifeline of status, legitimacy, and religion. That's why researchers like Mary Lou Reinerson have been studying Maya jade in high-tech labs, using density tests, spectral analysis, and microscopy to determine its origin and composition. The results are incredible. Some pieces were sourced from just a few isolated deposits in the Motagua Valley of Guatemala. That means jade had to be traded, gifted, or smuggled over long distances, and every chunk that made it into a royal tomb came with a story. even more impressive. The Maya learned to carve jade using nothing but abrasion tools made with garnet, one of the few minerals harder than jade. Imagine taking a rock that's basically as tough as modern steel and shaping it into a delicate earring or a mosaic mask using only friction and patience. It's the kind of craftsmanship that takes weeks or months for a single piece. So why does jade matter when we're talking about collapse? Because jade tells us who held power and how power was shifting. Toward the end of the classic period, the jade trade patterns change. Fewer elite burials contain jade. The styles grow more local, less refined. It's as if the networks that once connected the great cities were breaking down. If you were a king and couldn't get jade, you couldn't perform the proper rituals. You couldn't bury your ancestors in style. You couldn't prove your divine right to rule. And without ritual, the Maya world starts to unravel. It's a tragic irony. The very things that gave Maya society its brilliance, its complexity, its hierarchy, its deep spiritual symbolism also made it vulnerable. When the environment faltered, the supply chains broke. When the gods didn't deliver rain, the rituals stopped working. When jade couldn't be obtained, the illusion of control cracked. The people lost faith. The system stalled. And the kings, buried in stone and silence, watched their cities vanish into vines. But here's the hopeful part. The work isn't over. Excavations are ongoing. New tombs are being discovered. Every year, more glyphs are translated, more sediments sampled, more jade artifacts analyzed. We're in a golden age of Maya archaeology, and we're only just beginning to put the puzzle together. The lakes still hold secrets. The jungles still hide cities, and the jade, cold, green, and eternal, still whispers of kings, queens, and a world that rose as high as it could before vanishing into history. So what if the end of the Maya world wasn't just environmental or political, but spiritual? What if the same belief systems that built their cities also demanded blood to keep them alive? In the next episode, we're going deeper, not just into the ruins, but into the dark side of Maya religion. The severed heads found buried beneath altars, the gods that demanded human hearts in return for rain, the sacred cenotes that became underwater tombs. Because while we've uncovered the cities, the glyphs, and the jade, we're just beginning to face the terrifying truths carved into their rituals and remember the stakes we talked about. They don't go away. The Maya once believed that their world could literally end, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but completely if their gods weren't satisfied. That belief shaped everything, their wars, their calendars, their very sense of time. Now imagine what happens when that system begins to fail, when rain doesn't come, when rituals don't work, when the world feels like it's ending anyway. So stay with us, because the excavation isn't over. The deeper we dig, the stranger and more chilling it gets. We'll see you in part 2.